Welcome, everyone. Today we are not just telling a story. We are opening the door to a moment that could change a nation, and maybe the whole world. Because this is the truth. Wars do not end on the battlefield. They end in secret rooms, with impossible choices, and leaders who carry the weight of millions on their shoulders. In this story, you will walk inside those rooms. You will hear the pressure, you will feel the fear, and you will see how one decision can stop a war, or start something even more dangerous. This is not just history. This is strategy. This is power. This is the real face of peace and the real cost of it. So listen carefully. Follow every moment. Because once you understand this story, you will understand how the world truly works. And at the same time, you will grow your English, your thinking, and your view of the world. Chapter 1. Midnight in Kyiv. The night was cold, darker than usual. A thin wind moved between the tall buildings of Kyiv. For a moment, the city looked peaceful, almost asleep. But peace never lasts long here. At 1:03 a.m., the first explosion cut the silence. A deep sound, heavy, like the sky itself was breaking. Windows trembled, dogs barked. Lights turned on across the city as people jumped from their beds. A second explosion came. Then a third. This time the ground shook. Car alarms began to cry in the streets. Above the roofs, a red glow rose slowly, painting the clouds with fire. Families rushed to the hallways. Mothers held their children close. Old men searched for their documents and medicine. Everyone knew what was coming next. "Go! Go! To the metro!" a voice shouted from a balcony. It was the safest place in Kyiv, deep under the ground, a place where fear lived every night. Down in the streets, the sirens screamed. Long, sharp, desperate. People moved quickly, but without panic. They had done this too many times. A woman pushed a stroller with shaking hands. A boy carried his cat inside a blanket. Two teenagers tried to help an old neighbor walk faster. Another explosion hit close. The noise was louder than anything. The air felt hot for a moment. Debris fell from a building. A car window shattered in front of them. The boy stopped walking. His legs refused to move. His father put a hand on his shoulder. "We are almost safe," he whispered. "Just a little more." Inside the metro station, hundreds of people were already there. Some sat on the cold floor. Some lay on thin blankets. Babies cried softly. A few men checked their phones, scrolling for news, for answers. But the news tonight brought more questions than answers. On the screens, messages appeared. U.S. officials report progress in peace talks. Ukraine and America agree on key points of a new plan. Deal possible soon. People looked at each other. A woman asked, "Is it true? Will the war end?" No one knew. No one could say yes or no. A man in a military jacket sat down near a column. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to sleep, but his hands were shaking. He whispered to himself, "Please, let this be real." Above ground, Kyiv continued to burn. Firefighters tried to control the flames. Windows broke from the pressure of the blasts. A schoolyard filled with smoke. A small grocery store collapsed in the middle of the street, but even while the city suffered, the world was watching a different fire, a political fire. Far away, in warm rooms and safe offices, leaders discussed the future of this land. The reports came fast. From Washington, talks are moving forward. From Geneva, the delegations agree on most points. From Abu Dhabi, Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. continue discussions. Even the President of the United States posted a message online. Big progress. Maybe something good is happening. In the metro station, a young woman read the message out loud. Some people smiled for the first time that night. Others stayed silent. Hope can be dangerous, especially here. A man sitting nearby shook his head. Peace with who? He whispered. With the same people bombing us right now? No one answered him. Across the station, a group of children sat in a circle. One girl held a small flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling. She tried to make shapes with her hand. A butterfly. A bird? A heart. The other children watched quietly. They didn't understand the news. They only understood the darkness and the explosions. Time moved slowly underground. The sirens above finally stopped. The phone alerts became quiet. Kiev breathed again, tired, wounded, but standing. A soldier entered the station. His uniform was covered with dust. People moved aside to let him pass. He looked at everyone with calm eyes. It's over for now, he said softly. You can return home, but stay ready. Some families left immediately. Others waited a few more minutes. Fear teaches patience. As people walked out, the cold air hit their faces. The streets were still smoky. Pieces of metal and glass covered the sidewalks. A destroyed bus stood in the middle of the road. A firefighter sprayed water on a burning wall. But above this scene of destruction, a strange thought moved between the people. Could peace really be close? A mother looked at her son and said, If there is a chance for peace, even a small one, I want to believe. Her voice trembled. Not from the cold, but from hope. Because tonight, Kiev survived again. But survival is not enough anymore. People want more. They want a future. They want light after so many nights of fire. And somewhere far away, in rooms with closed doors, powerful men were writing that future. A future that could save lives, or break them. And the city waited, in silence, for the next message, the next explosion, or maybe the first real step toward peace. But tonight's question stayed in every heart. Is this the beginning of peace, or just another night in a long, endless war? Chapter 2. The Room with the Closed Door. The White House looked quiet from the outside. White walls, soft lights, calm gardens. But inside, behind one closed door, the air was heavy. Something important was happening. Something that could change the future of millions. It was late evening in Washington. The sun had already disappeared behind the city. Only the lamps in the hallways stayed on, giving the building a warm, golden color. But the room at the end of the corridor was different. Its lights were bright, its windows covered, its guards silent. Inside, President Donald Trump sat at a long table. A thick red folder lay open in front of him. Papers, maps, lists, numbers. Every page carried a piece of a plan that the world did not know yet. Around him stood a small group of advisors. Some whispered, some wrote notes, some waited for instructions, and in the corner of the room, a large screen showed a video call with diplomats in Geneva. Trump tapped his fingers on the table. His face looked serious, focused. "This war must end," he said slowly. His voice was calm, but firm. "We cannot continue like this." One advisor nodded. "Mr. President, the Ukrainians accepted many points today. They want changes, but they understand your timeline." Another advisor added, "And the Russians are still reading the revised plan. They say it can be a basis for peace." Trump leaned back in his chair. He looked at the red folder again. For a moment, he did not speak. Then he said, "Good. But we move fast. I want results." The plan had 28 points. 28 steps to stop a war that had burned Europe for almost 4 years. Some points were simple. Stop fighting. Exchange prisoners. Open humanitarian roads. But others were heavy, dangerous, and full of risk. Control of territories. The size of Ukraine's future army. Security guarantees. The question of NATO. These points were the real battle. The political battle. Trump opened one page and pointed at it. "This is the heart," he said. "If we cannot agree on security guarantees, the deal will not work." An advisor stepped closer. "Ukraine wants strong protection, something close to NATO's Article 5. He paused. "But giving that promise means America may enter a war if things go wrong." Trump looked at him directly. "And Russia? What do they want?" "They want recognition of the territories they control," the advisor replied. "They want Ukraine neutral, outside NATO, forever." The room fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew what these demands meant. Peace, but not a clean peace. Peace with a price. Trump closed the folder and stood up. He walked to the window and looked out toward the empty garden. The night was peaceful here, the opposite of Kiev's burning sky. Two worlds, connected by one decision. On the video screen, a diplomat from Geneva spoke. "Mr. President, if you push now, they may accept. Ukraine is tired. Russia wants relief. Europe is divided. The moment is open." Trump nodded slowly. "Then we take it." He went back to the table. "Where is Witkoff?" he asked, referring to his special envoy. "He is preparing for Moscow," an advisor said. "If needed, he will travel tonight." Trump smiled. "Good. He knows how to talk to them." Another advisor shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, there is concern about his last call with the Russians. The press may not like it." Trump waved his hand. "This is negotiation. We talk to everyone. We pressure everyone. That is how peace works." He took a pen from the table. "Let's finalize the revision. I want Ukraine and Russia to see the same message. The time for fighting is ending. For 2 hours the team worked. Words changed. Numbers adjusted. Sentences rewritten. Every detail mattered. Because every detail could start peace or destroy it. One advisor read a line aloud. Ukraine's army will be limited to a maximum size of... Trump raised his hand. Make it reasonable. They need to defend themselves. Another advisor asked, what about the demilitarized zone? No, Trump said firmly. Not like the first draft. It gave Russia too much. We balance it. Minutes passed, then hours. The documents began to look different, clearer, stronger. Finally, Trump placed his pen down. His voice dropped into a softer tone. Send it to Kyiv, and send it to Moscow. Let them understand we are serious. The room relaxed just a little. Chairs moved. People stretched their arms. Phones buzzed with new messages. But Trump was still watching the red folder, his face unreadable. A mix of confidence, pressure, and something deeper. He whispered, almost to himself, if this works, the world will change. Outside, the White House remained silent. The trees did not know. The birds did not know. But inside that one room, a decision had been made. A decision that could stop the bombs or create new storms. No one in Kyiv, Moscow, or Europe heard the words spoken that night. But soon, very soon, they would feel their weight. And the world would ask, was this the beginning of peace or the start of something more dangerous? Chapter 3. The Maps on the Kremlin Wall. Moscow was quiet under the winter sky. Snow covered the streets like a white blanket. Cars moved slowly. People walked with their heads down, protecting themselves from the cold wind. But inside the Kremlin, the cold was different. Not the cold of weather, but the cold of strategy. Deep inside the building, behind thick doors and long hallways, stood a large office with high ceilings and tall windows. A heavy red carpet covered the floor. Dark wooden shelves filled the walls, and at the center of the room, under a bright lamp, stood a huge map of Ukraine. Pinned with red lines, blue dots, and handwritten notes. President Vladimir Putin stood in front of it, hands behind his back, eyes focused, face unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He simply studied the map, as if every color and every number told him a story. A knock came at the door. "Come in," Putin said without turning around. 2 men entered, one military advisor, one political strategist. Both walked carefully, as if the room itself demanded silence. "Mr. President," the military advisor began, "we received the updated American plan." Putin nodded very slowly, his eyes still on the map. "Leave it on the table," he said. The strategist placed a thick document on the desk. 28 points, revised, adjusted, softened in some parts, and sharpened in others. But Putin still looked at the map. Finally, he spoke. "Show me the new lines." The military advisor stepped forward. He pointed to the red areas, regions under Russian control. Then to the yellow areas, regions still contested. Then to the blue areas, regions firmly held by Ukraine. The American plan freezes the front here, the advisor said, touching the southern line. It gives us the territory we control today. Putin raised one eyebrow. Only today? Yes, the advisor answered. Only today. Putin's eyes narrowed. He pointed to another area, the eastern region with its complicated borders. And here? The strategist spoke this time. The plan wants Ukraine to accept temporary borders, but Kyiv resisted this point. Putin finally turned around. His voice was calm. Too calm. Temporary borders, he repeated. A dangerous phrase. The strategist nodded. Yes, sir. Kyiv believes temporary could turn into permanent. Europe also refuses this point. Putin walked slowly toward his desk. His hands touched the plane for the first time. He opened the first page, read a few lines, closed it. America is moving fast, he said. Too fast. They want a deal before they lose influence. They want to control the outcome. The military advisor asked, Do you think Kyiv will accept? Putin smiled, a small, thin smile. Kyiv has no good choices. Accepting the plan makes them look weak. Rejecting the plan makes the war continue. He tapped the document lightly. This plan is not written for Ukraine. It is written for Washington. The strategist stepped closer. Sir, what do you want to do? Putin returned to the map. He touched one city with his finger. A city Ukraine still controlled. A city important for the future. This city, he said, they will not give it to us. No, the advisor replied. They will never accept that. Putin moved his finger to another point. This river, this barrier, this line. These are not just places on a map. They are the balance of power. He paused. The Americans want us to freeze here, he continued. But freezing is not winning. The strategist asked softly, Do you want more? Putin looked at him. His eyes were cold, sharp. Want? He repeated. This is not about what I want. This is about the future of Russia. He turned back to the map. You see this line? He traced a path with his finger. If we stop here, Ukraine will rebuild. Europe will send weapons. America will send money. In 5 years, maybe less, they will be stronger than before. The room fell silent. So, the strategist asked carefully, you think the plan is a trap? Putin did not answer at once. He walked across the room, thinking, calculating. Then he said quietly, Every plan from the West is a trap. He picked up the document again. But this trap can be turned, he added. If they want a frozen conflict, we must decide where to freeze it. The military advisor asked, And what about sanctions, sir? Putin closed the folder. The Americans offer slow relief. Too slow, but a bad peace may open doors. Economy, energy, trade. Another pause. Finally, he said, We will not reject the plan. Not yet. We will wait. We will watch. We will push for our version. He looked at the map one last time. Tell Washington we see potential, he said. Tell Kiev we expect serious negotiation. Tell Europe nothing. Let them guess. The two advisors bowed slightly and left the room. Putin stood alone again. Snow fell softly outside the window. The room was silent. Only the map remained in front of him, full of lines, full of meaning, full of future battles. He whispered to himself, "This is not peace. This is positioning." And somewhere far away, in Kiev, in Washington, in Brussels, leaders were making their own moves. The game was not ending. It was only changing. And the world would soon learn. A map can start a war, and it can shape a peace. But only if the hands holding the map agree. Chapter 4. Between the Hammer and the Anvil. Kiev was quiet again, but the quiet did not bring peace. It brought pressure, heavy pressure, because tonight the hardest decisions were not made in Washington or Moscow, but here, in the office of one man. President Volodymyr Zelensky sat alone at a wooden desk. The lights above him were soft and yellow. The room was small, with old walls and a single window that looked toward the dark sky of the city. Outside, the streets were still recovering from the last attack. Inside, the president was recovering from the last phone call. A message from Washington had reached him only minutes earlier. A friendly message, but a powerful one. You must choose soon. He closed his eyes for a moment. He took a slow breath. Then he opened the red folder in front of him. The updated peace plan. 28 points. Each point felt like a stone on his chest. A knock came at the door. Enter, Zelensky said quietly. Two advisors stepped inside. One carried a stack of documents. The other carried a tablet full of reports. Mr. President, the older advisor began, we have received the final revision from the Americans. They say you must respond tonight. Zelensky nodded. I know. The younger advisor placed the tablet on the desk. There is also a message from Europe. They ask you not to accept the plan without their changes. Zelensky gave a tired smile. So the Americans want speed, and the Europeans want caution. He shook his head. And we are stuck in the middle. He stood up and walked slowly toward the window. He looked down at the city. Lights flickered in rebuilt apartments. Ambulance sirens echoed faintly. Two soldiers walked past the gate carrying rifles. This is what we are protecting, he whispered. The older advisor stepped closer. Sir, you know the biggest problem. The plan demands recognition of territories currently under Russian control, and even more land in the east. Zelensky closed his eyes. Yes, the red lines. Not just red lines, the advisor said softly. They are the heart of this country. The younger advisor opened the folder and pointed to one line. Here, Mr. President, this is the point that will cause trouble. He read aloud, Ukraine will accept the current line of control as temporary borders until a future agreement. Temporary, a dangerous word. It could mean 1 year, or 10, or forever. Zelensky sat down again. He put his hands on his head. How can I sign this? He whispered. If I accept, they will say I surrendered our land, our people. And if you refuse? The older advisor asked. Zelensky looked at him in silence. They both knew the answer. If he refused, the war would continue. More cities destroyed, more families broken, more nights in the metro, more names on the list of the dead. He looked at the folder again. Each page was like a knife. Another knock at the door. This time, it was a military officer. His uniform was dusty. His boots still carried the smell of the battlefield. "Mr. President?" he said respectfully. "May I speak?" Zelensky nodded. "Of course." The officer stepped forward. "Sir, I came from the Eastern Front. Our soldiers are tired. Our supplies are thin, but they are still fighting with everything they have." He paused. His voice softened. "We can continue. We will continue. But the cost will be high." Zelensky felt the words hit him like a weight. He asked quietly, "How high?" The officer looked down. Then he looked up again. "Very high." Silence fell in the room. A long, painful silence. The younger advisor broke it. "Mr. President, the people believe in you. They trust you to choose what saves the nation, whether it is peace or resistance." Zelensky walked back to the desk. He placed his hand on the folder. He did not open it. He just touched it, as if it could burn him. "What do you think?" he asked them. The older advisor spoke first. "I think refusing the plan may protect our honor, but it will break our country." The military officer added, "And accepting the plan may save lives, but it will break many hearts." Zelensky felt trapped. Between two fires. Between two giants, Russia and America. Between two allies, America and Europe. Between duty to his people and duty to the future. He sat slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. Why must peace always feel like defeat? No one answered him. A message appeared suddenly on the tablet. A new alert. A fresh update. The younger advisor read it silently. Then he looked at Zelensky with wide eyes. "Sir, the U.S. says they expect your response by dawn." Dawn? Only a few hours away. Zelensky stood up again. He walked to the window. The city was silent, almost still. He placed his hand on the glass. The glass was cold, like the night, like the choice in front of him. "Tell them," he said finally, "I will decide before the sun rises." His voice was calm, but full of storm. Because tonight, he carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders, and the world waited for his answer. Chapter 5. Europe says no. Morning light touched the roofs of Brussels as the city prepared for another important day. Inside a tall glass building, the air was cool, sharp, and full of tension. Europe was waking up, not to birds or sunshine, but to urgent messages, new reports, and one big question. Will Ukraine accept the American plan? Leaders from across the continent began arriving early. Cars stopped one after another. Security guards opened doors. Cameras flashed. The world watched every step. Inside the main conference room, a long table waited. Flags stood behind the chairs, blue, red, white, gold. Each color carried a story. Each flag carried a fear. The first to enter was the French president. His face was serious, and his hands held a folder full of notes. Next came the German chancellor, then the Polish prime minister, then the president of the European Council. One by one, the most powerful voices in Europe sat down together. The French president broke the silence first. "We all read the American plan," he said. "It moves fast, too fast." The German chancellor nodded. "Yes, and it gives Russia more than we can accept." The Polish prime minister spoke next. "Ukraine is not just a neighbor. It is our shield. If that shield becomes weak, if it loses land, then we are all in danger." A quiet tension filled the room. They all knew the truth. If Ukraine accepted a bad deal, Europe would face a new map, a new reality, a new threat. One leader whispered softly, "Peace is good, but not peace that rewards aggression." Across the table, advisors opened laptops and showed the details of the American plan, its 28 points, its promises, its limits, its holes. A map lit up on the screen. It showed the current line of control. Red zones marked Russian-held areas. Yellow zones were the contested regions. Blue zones were still under Ukraine's flag. The French president pointed to the screen. "Look here. If Ukraine accepts these borders, Russia will gain strategic ground. It will sit closer to our doorstep." The German chancellor added, "And if Ukraine's army is limited, who will defend them in 5 or 10 years? An advisor scrolled to another page. "The plan gives Ukraine security guarantees," he explained. "Strong words, but no real tools." Another advisor whispered, "Words cannot stop tanks." The room fell silent again. Outside the windows, the morning traffic moved normally. People walked to work. Shops opened. Life looked safe and calm. But inside, leaders understood that safety can disappear quickly. A Finnish minister leaned forward. "We have learned something in Europe," she said. "Peace must be fair, or it becomes a pause before the next war." Her words hit the room like a quiet bell. The Polish prime minister added sharply, "If Russia feels rewarded, it will come again. Maybe not to Ukraine next time, maybe to someone else." Everyone knew who someone else could be: Poland, the Baltic states, maybe even more. The French president closed his folder slowly. "So we agree," he said. "We cannot support the American version." But another voice spoke, softer, wiser. The Italian prime minister. "We cannot just say no," he said. "We must offer something better." The room looked at him. He continued, "Ukraine needs peace. Ukraine needs protection. Ukraine needs hope. We must give Kyiv a stronger plan, a plan that keeps their borders safe, not broken." A Spanish minister nodded. Europe must show leadership, not just criticism. And so began the work. Advisors printed papers. Others made calls. Screens filled with maps, new ideas, new conditions. Slowly, Europe built its own version of the peace plan. Stricter, clearer, more balanced. One point said, "No recognition of Russian-controlled lands." Another said, No limits on Ukraine's army without Ukraine's approval. Another said, security guarantees must be real, not symbolic. The French president looked at the final draft and whispered, "This is the plan we can accept." But then came the hardest truth of all. Would America accept it? Would Russia accept it? And most importantly, would Ukraine be strong enough to demand it? The German chancellor spoke carefully. "We must send this to Kiev immediately. Zelensky must know he is not alone." The Polish prime minister added, "And we must prepare for pressure from Washington. They want a fast deal. We want a good one." At that moment, a message arrived on the phone of one advisor. He read it quickly. His eyes widened. "It is from Kiev," he said. Everyone looked at him. "What does it say?" the French president asked. The advisor read aloud, "President Zelensky has not decided. He will announce his answer at dawn." Dawn. Only hours away. The leaders exchanged worried looks. The German chancellor whispered, "Then this may be our last chance." The French president closed his eyes for a moment. "We must call him," he said. "We must tell him, Europe stands with you. Do not sign under pressure. Do not accept defeat disguised as peace." Outside, Brussels continued its quiet morning life. But inside the building, a storm of decisions moved quickly. Because Europe knew something very simple and very dangerous. If Ukraine falls into a weak peace, Europe may fall next. And the world waited, country by country, for Zelensky's answer. An answer that could decide not only Ukraine's future, but the future of an entire continent. Chapter 6. The Final Deadline. Night returned to Kiev like a heavy blanket. The sky was dark, almost black, and the city lights looked weak under it. But tonight, the darkness carried something new. A deadline. A line in time that could change everything. Inside the presidential building, the atmosphere was tense. Phones rang. Guards moved quickly. Advisors whispered in small groups. Everyone waited for one thing: Zelensky's decision before dawn. Just a few hours away, the president sat in a quiet room on the top floor. No cameras, no reporters, only a lamp, a wooden desk, and the red folder again. The American Plan. He touched the cover slowly. He had read it many times, but each time felt different. Some sentences looked soft, promising peace. Others cut deep, demanding sacrifice. A knock broke the silence. The head of security entered. "Mr. President, the Americans are asking for an update," he said calmly. Zelensky looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. "They will get my answer," he replied, "when the time comes." The officer nodded and left. Zelensky stood and walked to the window. Below, the streets were almost empty. But he knew millions of people were awake, waiting, afraid, hopeful, confused. Another knock. This time, 2 advisors entered, holding laptops and papers. "Mr. President," one began, "Washington has sent a message. They say the window for peace is closing. They want you to accept the plan tonight." Zelensky sat down slowly. "And Europe?" he asked. They are preparing a statement. They will reject the American version. They want you to wait." He sighed deeply. Two giants on each side. America pushing fast, Europe pulling back, and Ukraine stuck in the middle. The second advisor opened his laptop. "Sir, there is more." He turned the screen toward Zelensky. It was a message from someone powerful, someone who did not often write directly. It read, "If you do not accept by dawn, conditions may change." Zelensky read the message twice. His jaw tightened. Then he pushed the laptop away. "They want to force us," he said quietly. "Peace should not come with threats." The advisors exchanged worried looks. Zelensky leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice was low, thoughtful. "When this war started," he said, "no one believed Ukraine could resist. But we did. We fought. We survived. We protected our people." He paused. "But now they ask us to give away what we protected." He looked at them with tired eyes. "How can I do that?" The older advisor stepped forward. "Sir, refusing the plan may bring more war. Accepting it may bring more anger. There is no easy path." Zelensky nodded slowly. "I know." Silence filled the room again. Outside the window, a soft wind moved the trees. Inside, the weight of the world sat on one man's shoulders. A sudden sound came, a distant explosion, not near, but not far, a reminder that the war was still here. The younger advisor spoke softly. "Mr. President, the people trust you. They will follow the path you choose." Zelensky looked at him. "Will they? If I accept this plan, they may call me weak. If I refuse, they may call me cruel." "Leadership is not about being loved," the advisor said. "It is about protecting the future." Zelensky stood and walked to a shelf. He picked up a small photograph, a picture of a destroyed school in the east. Children's drawings still hung on the broken wall. He held the photo for a long time. Then he whispered, "I want these children to sleep without fear." He returned to the desk. He opened the red folder once more. He read each point slowly, carefully. Outside the room, tension grew. America waited. Europe waited. Russia waited. And millions of Ukrainians waited in silence. Another hour passed. Zelensky finally closed the folder. He looked at his advisors. "I have made my decision," he said. Their faces tightened. He continued softly, "But before I announce it, I must speak to one more person." The older advisor asked, "Who, sir?" Zelensky walked toward the door. "My wife." He left the room quietly. Down the hallway, he entered the private residence. His wife was sitting on a sofa, reading messages from families, soldiers, and volunteers. She looked up. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am," he answered. "They want an answer before dawn." She stood and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Then give them the answer that lets you sleep at night. The answer you can explain to every mother, every soldier, every child." Zelensky closed his eyes for a moment. Her words touched something deep inside him. He opened them again. Clearer, stronger. "Thank you," he whispered. He walked back to the office. The advisors were waiting. He sat down, lifted his pen, and wrote the first line of his official statement. When he finished, he placed the pen down, gently, firmly. Outside, the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon. Kiev held its breath. The world held its breath. The deadline had arrived, and Zelensky's answer was ready. But was it the beginning of peace, or the start of a new storm? Chapter 7: The Deal, or the Trap. Dawn arrived slowly over Kyiv. The first light touched the broken roofs, the quiet streets, the burned buildings. It touched the soldiers at the checkpoints, the mothers carrying water, the children who did not sleep at all. And it touched the presidential building where a whole nation waited for one sentence, one decision, one man's voice. Inside, the atmosphere was silent, too silent. Even the guards walked more softly than usual. Everyone knew this morning was different. President Zelensky sat alone in a small room with white walls and a wooden floor. A camera stood in front of him. A microphone waited. A sheet of paper lay gently in his hands. The statement he wrote before the sun rose. His fingers touched the paper slowly, like he was feeling the weight of every letter. Outside the door, advisors stood in a line. None of them spoke. A soft knock came. The communication officer entered. "Mr. President, everything is ready. When you speak, it will be live across the country." Zelensky nodded. "Give me one more minute." The officer left. Zelensky closed his eyes for a moment. In that silence, he saw everything. The destroyed schools, the burning homes, the underground shelters, the tired soldiers, the families waiting at train stations, the names of the fallen. He opened his eyes again. This was the moment. He walked to the chair, sat down slowly, and looked directly into the camera. The officer counted 3, 2, 1. The red light turned on. Zelensky took a breath. "My dear Ukrainians," he began, "tonight I received the final version of the peace plan from the United States." Outside, all across the country, people stopped moving. In kitchens, on buses, in shelters, in military bases, every ear listened. "The plan is strong in some points, but weak in others," he continued. "It gives us a path to peace. But it also takes from us things that we have fought to defend." He paused. His eyes looked tired, but steady. "I have spoken with our allies in Europe. I have heard their concerns. I have spoken with our partners in America. I have heard their urgency." Another pause. People leaned closer to their screens. "I have spoken with our commanders, with our volunteers, with our wounded, with our families." His voice softened. "And I have spoken with my wife, a mother, like many mothers in Ukraine." He looked down for just a second, then raised his head again. "My decision is this." Silence filled every home, every heart, every street. "We cannot accept the plan in its current form." A wave of reactions moved across the nation. Surprise, fear, relief, confusion. But Zelensky continued firmly. We are not rejecting peace. We are not rejecting dialogue. We are not rejecting hope. He lifted the paper slightly. We ask for changes, clear changes, fair changes. Peace must protect our future, not weaken it. Outside, the streets started to fill with voices. Some cheered, some cried, some prayed. Zelensky continued, We will send our own proposals today. We want a deal that respects Ukraine's people, a deal that respects international law, a deal that stops the war, not just pauses it. He took one final breath. Our hands are open for peace, but they will never sign away our home. The camera light turned off. Zelensky leaned back in the chair. His eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, his advisors were standing quietly at the door. Sir, one said softly, Washington will respond soon. Zelensky nodded. And Moscow? They will respond too. The advisor hesitated. Sir, your decision will make some people angry. Zelensky stood slowly. I did not choose this job to make people happy, he said. I chose it to protect this country. Outside the building, a mix of emotions filled the morning air. At a cafe, an old man smiled. He did the right thing, he said. At a hospital, a nurse wiped her eyes. I just want the bombing to stop. In the metro, a mother hugged her daughter tightly. Maybe peace will come, she whispered. Maybe. On a military base, soldiers watched the speech again and again. Some nodded with pride. Some stayed silent. They knew the road would be long. Far away, in Washington, advisors sat around a table, reading Zelensky's statement. Some looked impatient, some looked worried. In Brussels, leaders felt a small relief. Ukraine had not surrendered. In Moscow, the message arrived on a silver tray. A cold silence followed. A silence that could mean many things. Because peace is a strange road. Sometimes it begins with agreement. Sometimes it begins with rejection. Sometimes it begins with courage. That morning, Ukraine did not win. It did not lose. It simply took one more step into the unknown, a step toward a peace that might come, or a storm that might follow. But one thing was clear. The next move would not be made in Kyiv. It would be made somewhere else, in the minds of men far away. Men who held the power to end the war, or to continue it. And the world waited, again. For the next message, the next meeting, the next dawn.